in office, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, friends, just 30 years ago, the leaders of our countries declared that the era of confrontation and division had ended. The Charter of Paris seemed to have laid the foundation for what would have been seen as a naive utopia before. Long-standing democracy, peace, and unity in Europe. The decades that followed showed light and shadow. On the one hand, OSCE contributed to strengthening security and promoting stability throughout our region, in particular through confidence building between and democratization assistance inside those countries where it was most active. On the other hand, old unresolved conflicts were simmering and new ones erupted. And in some places, democratic progress was halted or even reversed. Over all these years, the OSCE made numerous attempts to find ways for enhancing its effectiveness. We can recall Astana Summit and others. But today, we are probably further away from unity and mutual trust than ever since the fall of the Iron Curtain. Again and again during the past decades, we experienced wars on OSCE territory, the decline of arms control regimes, and brutal repression of opposition movements. We have seen assaults on free speech and free media, flawed elections, growing intolerance and discrimination, as well as other deep divisions and polemics inside our societies. Unfortunately, there has also been a rise of extremist groups and again devastating terrorist attacks. This gives rise to many questions. Does this mean that this organization has not done its job? The answer to this is twofold, as is the whole history of the OSCE. The OSCE structures have performed very well, considering the scarce resources put at their disposal by participating states. But more than these structures, the OSCE's you, dear ministers, your ministries, and the states that you represent. So the question that we have to ask today is not, has this OSCE lived up to the expectations created 30 years ago? No. The question is, have the governments of the participating states put in practice the pledges and promises they made over the past 30 years? For parliamentarians and for me as the president of the OSCE's own parliamentary assembly, this is a very legitimate question to be asked. As the foreign ministers of the 57 participating states, can you say that your policies and actions are always in line with OSCE commitments? And how often are selfish national interests or power games abandoned and replaced by a cooperative attitude? There are so many fundamental challenges to the future of the peoples of our countries. Climate change and resulting environmental cataclysms, pandemics, scarcity of natural resources, and ensuring geopolitical conflicts, migration, terrorism, and international organized crime. Are we all investing enough into common efforts regarding these issues instead of wasting resources on a renewed arms race, hybrid warfare, violations of international borders, and occupation, manipulated elections, and the oppression of the opposition? And how much attention is paid to the implementation of OSCE principles and commitments by the governments and inside your countries? And how much interest do they show in making the OSCE perform for the well-being of our citizens? In an organization in which every participant is accountable to the others, it is of course legitimate and necessary to address these issues. Where we see failure to comply with OSCE's and other international standards. We as the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly have been very outspoken on this. Whether it is the violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity in the countries like Ukraine and Georgia, minority rights, democratic backsliding, or human rights atrocities. It is, for instance, appalling when we see peaceful protesters beaten or shot to death because governments cling to power. It is right to say this loud and clear, and we should be as critical of ourselves as we are of our partners. And most importantly, we should ask ourselves whether we individually contribute to the restoration of trust and of cooperation within the OSCE space. And excuse my bluntness, how often ministers engage directly with their representatives at the OSCE in Vienna when they sit together to do the diplomatic groundwork for what is so vital for our future. And what the citizens that we represent expect from us is not just a repetition of long lists of wrongdoings, but our creative and credible answers to the burning question about how we intend to find a way out of this situation, which is so much out of line of what the authors of Paris Charter had been hoping for. Recent events, for instance, in Nagorno-Karabakh, demonstrated again that the failure to devote sufficient interest in the solution of long-standing conflicts inevitably leads to less security and turmoil. Elsewhere, the same is true about the neglect of basic requirements regarding the development of democratic structures and the protection of human rights. As the OSCPA, we, with our direct representatives of people and our capacity to engage in frank, open dialogue and parliamentary diplomacy, we continuously have been offering our assistance. And the pandemic has not stopped us. Having been unable to convene since last February our regular consultative and deliberative process, which halted soon after our winter meeting, we organized numerous parliamentary web dialogues, which brought together experts, representatives of intergovernmental structures, with hundreds of parliamentarians discussing the pandemic and core OSCE issues. In late summer and autumn, we have also resumed our election observation activities. Through our parliamentary networks, we provide great tools for the facilitation of dialogue in conflict situations. And we have reiterated our offer in crisis situations like in Nagorno-Karabakh and in Belarus. The OSCE's intergovernmental structures have benefited from the synergies of our joint work, and this could be exploited much further. We remain engaged in Central Asia and the Western Balkans. We cherish our strong transatlantic ties, including through our excellent partnership with the US Helsinki Commission. Beyond our region, we are eager to extend our hands to partners in Asia and the Mediterranean. And our most recent contribution, dear ministers, is an appeal to you. We want to make full use of the OSCE potential to help build a safer and more stable future for us all. This already has the support of so many present and former senior OSCE leaders. Political support and adequate resources should be provided to all executive structures, and in particular in the activities of the OSCE institutions. This would enhance efforts to protect human rights and fundamental freedoms, achieve gender equality, promote tolerance and non-discrimination, protect media freedom, and more broadly, the stability of our diverse societies, and to strengthen democratic institutions in all participating states. Our initiative, a call for action, reaffirming our common purpose, has been endorsed and signed by more than 50 former and present OSCE leaders, including chairs in office, presidents of the Parliamentary Assembly, Secretary Generals of the OSCE and the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and heads of institutions. Despite all the difficulties that we are facing during these 2 days, and in the days and months that follow, we must make an attempt to relaunch all efforts to bring back the spirit that motivated the signatories of the Helsinki Final Act and the Charter of Paris. Increasing our attention to this organization is even more urgent, given that the daily operations in Vienna and the field presences are impacted by the pandemic, and while COVID-19 is in the focus of so much attention. I see it as a positive sign that delegations found consensus on the appointments of new heads of institutions, and we'd like to commend Albanian chairmanship for their efforts and, of course, incoming Swedish chairmanship. And I wish that this be finally approved by you tomorrow. This would already represent a significant contribution to make the work of the OSCE more effective and in future years. Dear colleagues, dear ministers, this is my last appearance before you in my capacity as Parliamentary Assembly President. I would therefore like to finish by thanking all those I have been able to enjoy good cooperation with. Chairmanships, ministries and ministers, ambassadors, leaders of executive structures, my colleagues in the PA and the numerous staff. And I hope for your fruitful work on behalf of the OSCE and wish you all success in your future endeavors. Thank you very much.